This is the presentation for Chapter 7, Bioethical Issues. So, the goal of nursing is to promote the well-being of the patient. But in the course of your nursing career, you're likely to encounter ethical dilemmas that can cause conflict between you and the patient, or even the patient and their family. For example, when the issue of abortion arises, abortion um, So abortion is when the pregnancy is terminated before the fetus is considered viable. If it occurs due to some type of outside intervention, then it's elective or induced abortion. Um, and if it occurs without outside intervention, then that would be considered a miscarriage. So abortions have religious, social, and legal implications, and we have Roe versus Wade, which was a Supreme Court decision in 1973 that made elective abortions legal in the United States. But there's still, a lot of ethical and moral issues um, revolving around this. Um, so the fundamental issues of the abortion debate are when life begins and the rights of freedom of choice. So the pro-life supporters believe life begins at the moment conception occurs, and so therefore abortion would be considered killing. Whereas pro-choice supporters believe women have a right to choose and say the fetus is not a human until it can actually live outside the body. And so believe, women have a right to choose what they want to do. Genetics is the study of genes, heredity, and various living organizations. Now, with genetics, you can alter organisms, and things such as cloning can take place with genetics. Some issues in genetics arise with genetic testing. So, if you get genetic testing and find out you're at risk for a disease such as cancer or something like that, people have a fear that they might be denied insurance or denied employment or something like that. Another issue can arise if a person donated cells for research after they die, and the researcher finds something, and then the issue arises of whether or not are they required to tell the family a genetic issue may exist. Issues can also arise with the misuse of genetic research. Um, when we're talking about GINA, GINA, um, that's Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. And it's a law that was created to guide healthcare workers in how to handle genetic information and protect clients from discrimination. Um, and it also limits the amount of information an employer can disclose to a spouse. And then the Affordable Care Act made it illegal for insurance companies to discriminate against people based on their genetic information. So you have, say for example, when we're talking about these issues, if an insurance company finds out you're predisposed to cancer or whatnot, then they might try to deny you or something like that, because they don't want to take on that liability. Or an employer, for instance, if they found out, then maybe they deny you employment or something. And so these laws were put into place to prevent these discriminatory acts from occurring. Okay, so we also have issues arising with informed consent, confidentiality, or emotional impact with when we're talking about genetics and genetic research. With informed consent, the issue arises of whether parents violate their children's rights if they give informed consent for their child to have genetic testing. Confidentiality can come about when we're talking about who can access your genetic testing. So back to the employer, should they be allowed to, access genetic information on individuals? Emotional impact can pose an ethical issue. For example, if a patient finds out he's genetically predisposed to cancer, how might that impact that person? Self-determination means nurses are not allowed to participate in anything that would force a client to participate in genetic testing, or they're not allowed to reveal a patient's genetic test results. Fetal tissue research involves taking living cells from an aborted fetus and transplanting it into people with chronic diseases. So issues arise here with the right to the right to life. People that believe in the right to life, and so with the development of the Human Genome Project, scientists are now able to grow their own fetal tissue. The fear of whether abortions would increase to support this is one of the issues that can arise when we're talking about use of fetal tissue. Another issue that can arise with this is whether it's ethical for researchers to pay someone for a fetus. And yet another issue is whether it's ethical to use in vitro fertilization to create a life for the sole purpose of research. So nurses in abortion clinics, of course, would be impacted by these dilemmas. Cord blood banking uses the stem cells present in the umbilical cord blood to treat diseases. So the idea is you bank or save the cord blood for later use to treat a disease. So public cord banks take in donations that are used for anyone in need. So this type of cord blood banking is generally accepted as long as the guidelines are followed. There's no fees attached to public cord blood banking, but the families that donated the blood have no access to this for future use if they should need it. Cord blood banking charges a fee, but the family can access the blood for future use if they need it. A disease or something arose down the road. Cord blood banking can be used to treat various diseases and is regulated by the FDA. Public cord blood banking is more accepted because of the low cost for donors. And then the American Academy of Pediatrics actually advises against private cord blood banking unless there's a family history of a certain genetic disease. Organ transplantation is generally accepted for the most part, but it can be expensive. Actually, some of the procedures can be pretty costly. You have a lot of people involved in the process. You got the donor, the donor's family, the medical and the nursing personnel, the recipient of the donation, and his or her family. And all of these people have various rights and responsibilities in the process. So the three main sources of where you obtain organ and tissue donations: a living related donor, so someone that's living that's related to you; a living unrelated donor, so someone that's living that's not related to you; or a cadaver, which is a deceased individual. So several issues can arise with organ donation. For example, Should a parent consent for one child to donate an organ, such as a kidney, to a sibling without the donor child's consent? Or when you have a deceased donor, when does death occur? So the most common criteria used for this is neurologic criteria, meaning the person is brain dead, and at least one physician that's not associated with the transplant team must make that determination. Another issue arises when determining who gets the organ. The Uniform Anatomical Gift Act was passed to increase the supply of donor organs and reduce confusion regarding organ donation. The National Organ Recipient List attempts to list and rank in a non-discriminatory way everybody who needs organs. When you talk about DCD, that's just a donation after cardiac death. So these organs are removed before the person is brain dead. And then VCA or CTA, that's just a category of transplantable tissues such as the skin, the blood vessels, the muscles, nerves, bone, and connective tissue. So on the previous slide, we talked about the National Organ Recipient List and how they try to list and rank the who would get the donations in a non-discriminatory manner. So the criteria that they use for ranking include the patient's need, the length of time they've been on the donor list, the person's likelihood for survival, has the person received the organ transplantation in the past already, is there value to the community for this person receiving it, and tissue compatibility. Of course, they have to be compatible with the donor. So most public money that's allocated for healthcare is spent during the last year of life for a lot of adult or elderly patients. The traditional belief has been that life should be preserved at all costs and by all available means. So the issue here arises is whether you should spend large amounts of money on terminally ill patients in their last year of life to prolong life. When we talk about hospice and palliative care, that's been increasing. And in these areas, you provide pain relief and comfort, but you're not trying to cure or prolong the person's life. Now, that could still mean a cancer patient gets radiation, but it doesn't mean you're trying to cure the cancer. If, say for instance, the person has a large tumor somewhere that's causing them a lot of pain, and giving them this radiation could decrease that tumor. By decreasing that tumor, you therefore improve the person's comfort level. So they could still get that, but they're not getting it to try to cure the disease. They're just trying to make them more comfortable. Another ethical issue can arise with tube feeding, which of course is to provide nutrition and hydration for a person. So the issue arises here is, when does the tube feeding stop being beneficial for a person? Another issue is, should taxpayers pay for people who don't take care of themselves? For example, you have smokers with COPD, or drug abusers, and they have whatever conditions that that they might have or whatnot, and so those issues arise. So other ethical issues arise when we're talking about, does a person have a right to die? So should euthanasia or assisted suicide be an option, for patients. We're talking about ventilation and CPR. Are those rights to patients? Now, one thing I do want to point out when we're talking about ventilation is if a physician orders a ventilator to be stopped, that physician needs to put that ventilator in writing. That order to stop that ventilator in writing. If you discontinue that ventilator before the physician has put it in writing, then it could be considered murder. So you never want to take someone off a ventilator until you've actually seen the order to discontinue it in writing. Advanced directives, we have living wills and durable power of attorney for healthcare. So a living will is an actual document that says if I'm no longer able to speak for myself or say what I want done for myself medically, this is what I want done for me. A durable power of attorney for healthcare, it's a document where you have appointed a health proxy to say, if I'm no longer able to say what I want done for myself medically, then this person is able to make healthcare decisions for me. But you have to make sure that it is for healthcare, because there's another one, a durable power of attorney for finance, and so that's different than healthcare. Because a person has durable power of attorney for finance does not mean they can make healthcare decisions for you. It has to be a power of attorney for healthcare. And so as nurses, we need to be able to help our patients understand these options and know what their rights are regarding advanced directives. Euthanasia implies a peaceful death. So when we talk about active euthanasia, that's when the physician gives the patient a lethal dose of something to hasten his or her death. Whereas passive euthanasia is withholding a life-saving treatment, such as tube feed or something like that. Physician-assisted suicide is when the physician orders a lethal dose of something for the patient and the patient self-administers it. So these are illegal in most states, but there are a handful of states that do allow physician-assisted suicide. But HIV and AIDS strike up a lot of emotions in some people. Ethical issues arise with the patient's right to privacy and right to care. HIV and AIDS cases must be reported to the CDC, but their right to privacy should not be violated. So you do have ethical issues that arise when we say, is it fair not to tell a healthcare worker that their patient is HIV positive? Also, healthcare workers must not reveal HIV patients' gender, since a large number of HIV patients are transgender. And then always note that these people have a right to be cared for with dignity and respect. That's all patients that you have a right to be cared for with dignity and respect, no matter what their disease might be. Remember, nurses are mandated reporters for child abuse and elder abuse. Your goal is to protect the patient. You do have issues that arise with children regarding informed consent. Parents consent for children to have immunizations, tests, and other procedures. And so the issue is, when do children develop the capacity to make their own or make these decisions, for themselves?